We live in a time when our idea of community is frayed, strained due to our busy lives, challenged by the political landscape and competing responsibilities. Some of us believe that getting involved will not change anything. Fortunately, though, there are many people in our community who are doing something about the conditions in which we live. This program will show you that one person can make a difference and that the power of one is within all of us. Welcome to the Power of One. And welcome to LaViva Primm, our guest today from Sources. She is the manager, director, supervisor, guru of employment for Sources, which is a part of Union Station. Is that right?
Absolutely, Union Station Homeless Services.
Yeah. So can you talk for a minute about what you do and how you do it and how it benefits the community?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm really glad to be here. So Sources Career Development is the employment program for Union Station Homeless Services. The program has been around for over 20 years, and our goal to
Union Station or Sources?
Sources, and Union Station for more than 40.
Yeah.
Sources Career Development, our mission is to help connect people to meaningful employment. The individuals that we work with are real people with real issues that are deserving and absolutely capable of winning, securing meaningful jobs that will help them pay their bills, jobs that they will enjoy, and jobs that allow them to give back to the community.
Fantastic. So one of the organizations I worked for a while, their philosophy was to hire people who had gone through the process themselves. So just in general terms, when you think about a case manager or a job developer, how does it benefit that individual to have maybe been a client at one time or gone through the process or the struggle of recrafting their lives? What role does that play?
Well, in particular, I would say there's two levels that we encourage each other on. We encourage each other, first of all, to remember what it was like for us when we conducted our last job search, to stay very much in touch with those thoughts and feelings, the feeling of isolation, perhaps of rejection, feeling less than, not feeling great about yourself. And the second level is to be very, very clear about why we're in a person's life. And we're in a person's life in order to partner with them toward their employment goals, and we do that by applying our expertise. So we both remember what it was like to be a job seeker, and we also remember what value we can bring as experts, if nothing else, as people that observe lots of job seekers and are able to notice what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I always worry about, sometimes I think like human memory is frail. So human memory, once you get to a point where you're more comfortable, then you forget about what it was like when you were struggling. That isn't always the case, but I think some people do. They kind of move on and then they forget how difficult it was. Do you see that your staff, that they do a pretty good job of staying in tune to where they came from?
We really challenge each other to do just that, even if we didn't come from there. We challenge each other to bring our hearts to work. We challenge each other to really understand what another person is experiencing from their point of view, not ours. We challenge ourselves to remember that we have families, we have friends, we have significant others that sometimes help us along and sometimes don't help us along. And so we work very hard to manage to keep it real with the people that we serve.
Well, I think that's critical too, is that so often, most all of us have someone in our families who has issues. And so, but oftentimes we can't, and just to think about it in my own family, sometimes it's hard for you to help your own family members.
Sure.
So that's why an organization like
Absolutely.
Sources is really, really critical.
Absolutely.
Because families can't do it on their own.
Absolutely. Shouldn't have to. I don't think that we're necessarily meant to intervene in each other's lives when we're family, specifically in that way. There should be a different kind of unconditional love at work, hopefully, in families. And the relationship that we have, we are able to demonstrate caring and unconditional positive regard, but without any judgment, without, a person can say, hey, this is what's going on with me, and not fear how it's going to impact us. It can stay just about them.
Yeah, there's another organization in town that always talks about unconditional love, and it's fantastic. It's like, and it's manifested, I think, or demonstrated in one of your other philosophies, and that's never giving up on someone. But, and I totally understand that, but talk to us a little bit about the challenges of doing that, because, again, thinking about my family, there are family members who improve, and then they regress, and then they improve, and then they fall back again. How do you manage to stick with somebody?
Well, it's actually easier than not for us, Brian, because at Sources, it fits in with us keeping it real with people. We can understand that a person's story is not a success story. Their story is their life. And life has ups and downs. And we don't have to feel like we're limited in just a short period of time to spend with someone to make sure they get it right the first time. We're able to meet them where they are, even if they keep coming back, and we have to keep coming back. It's actually, I think, a design for applying employment services, especially in this type of an economic environment, that works. Because people aren't getting one good job and then heading off into the sunset. It just doesn't happen.
No, we could talk about that for a while, and at some point I want to talk to you about how our society has changed economically, and in particular with work, and then the future of work. But before we do that, you just mentioned something that I think is really fascinating, and I think our society has a tendency to talk about life as a progression, or like life is always, getting better and better and better, and then we succeed. Instead of looking at life as what you just said, is that it's just your experience, and not seeing it as winning or losing, or being better or worse at any point in time. How do you manage to do that in the context in which we live? Because the messages we receive on television or in the media are, you have to do better, you're not doing good enough, or you are not good enough.
Right. Well, I'll answer that question in two parts. The first is I don't watch a lot of commercial television, so I miss out on a lot of those messages. The more conscious I am about what I'm letting in, the happier and more peaceful I am. And so we don't really let that energy come into the work that we do. We stamp it out as soon as it gets there. I'm not saying that we don't ever have trouble keeping our course, but that's our agreement, that we're going to work toward that. The other, with regard to doing it differently than the world tells us to do it,
Right.
the rewards are so much better doing it this way. Yeah. They really are. I don't have to be the expert in everything, I can let people be who they are, and they let me be who I am, and together we're able to make progress. The people that we work with want the same things that we want, which is to make progress, and to be able to make the kind of decisions that show that a person is connected to society, is able to create stability for themselves, and to exercise some choice.
Yeah, I think they also want to feel good about themselves.
Of course.
But part of that is that they feel like other people care about them. Mm-hmm. So that's what you provide, I think, is a caring or a nurturing atmosphere. So what I've found in some of the work I've done, and then also, again, with my family, is that addiction creeps in, and it it takes control of the individual. What strategies or what have you found to be successful to work with people who have either addiction issues or addictive personalities?
Certainly, these days, addiction is something that we're all dealing with, I think, in one way or another. It's a way that we understand at Union Station Homeless Services that it's a phenomena that can be a part of a person's life who's experienced trauma and some other things.
Yeah.
So we're understanding it on many different levels, and we are very conscious when we decide how to regard someone or how to treat someone, how to best partner with someone who's dealing with addiction. When I first came to Sources Career Development, like other employment programs, we had a standard for sobriety, for example.
So talk about that for a second. You mean you had a requirement for the individual to receive services?
Exactly. In order for them to receive services, I think the eligibility criteria was they had to be 6 months clean and sober, and then 60 days clean and sober. And then we decided, a person, basically our eligibility criteria today is that we want to work with people that want to work.
How long ago was that?
That we changed that?
Yeah.
It's been at least 5 years now.
Good.
It's a much more realistic way to work with people. We're able to recognize that there are many people who are successful that hold down jobs that are still dealing with addiction and or using substances. So we're not going to start off with judgment. We're going to start off with figuring out how to help you get a job.
Yeah, and to meet people where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would seem like it would be not limiting. I don't want to be critical in any way, but it would just seem like it would cut some people out if you had that kind of a requirement.
Without a doubt, it'll cut people out, and unnecessarily so is the point I want to get to.
Yeah.
It may not be necessary for a person to establish that kind of sobriety without having an opportunity to work toward a meaningful job. Also, with regard to how we deal with addiction, we address people up front with regard to them being 360 degrees a human being. And so when they come to our services, we talk to them about their health and their wellness goals. We're not going to work with them toward those, but we support their health and wellness. We tell them that we believe in recovery in all areas of life, whether they're living with substance abuse issues, mental health issues, physical health issues, spiritual issues, etc.
Yeah. No, it has to be comprehensive, and that also goes to the fact of making people employable. So that's something else that I've struggled with, certainly with people who I know, is that sometimes they say, well, he's not employable or she's not employable. How does that strike you when you hear those comments?
I don't like that word, employable.
Yeah.
There are so many different jobs that require so many different kinds of genius, that we believe that there's a job out there for someone, and there's enough. We're not operating on a scarcity model. We believe that there's enough. And so I like to show a picture of someone that I met. I consider her a friend. She's absolutely gorgeous. If she has one piercing, she probably has 50. She's got tattoos just everywhere. And she's a very successful business owner in West Hollywood. And so no one could tell her she's got to get rid of her. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
There's jobs for, and people are going to find success in their niche. We want to help them find that part of the world so that they can get in where they fit in.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Some people would look at her, and I know guys who look like that too, and they would say immediately they're not employable.
Right.
And that's part of it, is the physicality or your presence. So years ago it was like having long hair. Then of course, like you were saying, the piercings and tattoos. But the other, I think, angle or perspective on employability is psychological and emotional
course.
health.
Of course.
So how does
Of
that
course.
play in?
Sure. So some people might call it soft skills, and those are things that those habits, I think generally people mean when they talk about soft skills of coming to work on time and knowing when to take a break and how to come back from break on time, how to get along with difficult
coworkers.
supervisors, co-workers, et cetera, those kinds of skills. And then there's also the characteristics that people are looking for, like a sense of stability and knowing how to act, not talking to oneself, for example, a hygiene standard that is standard. However, I hear these stories. I heard a story from a woman who said that she's always, her whole life, had trouble getting to work on time. And what a blessing she found it when she found a job that gave her like an hour and a half window to get to work. It worked for her.
And then
It
she
worked
was.
for her.
Then she was.
And then she was employed, exactly, when she found the right job. So I think that's not to say that people might not have to make changes. My laid off, not feeling great about myself in between jobs, I don't know when the next one's gonna come along self, needs some work in order to, be at my optimal level at work. But the point is that I don't know what that is for someone else because I don't know where their next job is going to come from. I just have an idea about where to look.
Yeah, and that person needs some work, but what I think you guys provide too is that person needs support, or that person needs someone who can listen to them, or that person needs someone at least to work through feeling like I'm just going to lay on the couch all day today because nothing is going to happen anyway, because no one's going to hire me.
Right.
So that's what you guys provide, don't you think? Is that
absolutely? We absolutely provide support. We provide as much of it as we can in 40 hours a week. I want to say though that we also provide people the opportunity and the kind of ways and means to let businesses tell them what they want. We want people to get out there so they can have that experience, so that if they're looking to become truck drivers, go outside and talk to some truck drivers, talk to companies that hire truck drivers, find out what they're looking for. We don't have to tell you what it takes. We want to get you in a position where you can find out what it takes to be a truck driver.
Yeah. I have so many questions I want to ask you. I wish we had more time. I want to look at this a little bit more globally. And since you are in an organization that works with homeless individuals, I think you have some experience in this. But how is it, or how, and let's talk on the macro level, so let's talk on society level.
Sure.
How is it that in a country that, one, always talks about how democratic it is and how just it is and how fair it is, and two, is filled with so many resources, how is it that we have, and I was just talking to someone from another agency downtown, anywhere from 40 to 60,000 people in LA County alone living on the street. How does that happen? I'm sorry, it's this annoying question that I have all the time in my head. Because you drive down the 110 and you see all those tents on the bridge overpasses.
It's hard to see.
Yeah.
And it does make a person ask some difficult questions. Sometimes the answers we come up with make us feel uncomfortable. I know that. My answer is not going to necessarily make anyone feel better, I think. Poverty is a reality for a lot of different reasons. And most people are homeless because of poverty.
Right.
They don't have enough money to pay rent. They weren't blessed with, the kind of, I guess you could say, real estate passed down by generations. Like a lot of us are able to benefit from, our parents were able to buy a house, and so now we're living in it type thing. Just a lot of us are struggling right now with regard to being able to afford housing. So there's that facet of it. But part of it, I've got to say, is by design. At Sources, we acknowledge that in the world, globally, at least this part of it.
Right.
People are experiencing discrimination. They are experiencing oppression. They are experiencing disenfranchisement along a lot of different levels. Some of the people that we work with have been working very, very hard to make a difference in their lives and in the lives of their family members, and have been fighting a struggle that many of us would have thrown our hands up to a long time ago, but they persist. I'm convinced that we represent the hardest working segment of our economy, because the people that I work with are amazingly strong and persistent in their desire and in the steps that they're willing to take to make a difference, even against some odds that are pretty frightening.
Yeah, and that's another, I think, part of the societal view is that oftentimes the poor are portrayed as being lazy. And I always think about that, and I think, man, some of the people I know who are what are known as working class, they're up early, they are laboring. I mean, just take, for example, strawberries. It's not easy work. I mean, if you have a few strawberries in your yard and you go and you pick them, that's not that difficult. But imagine if you did that for 8 hours a day, week after week after week. So why is it that that poor people are often saddled with this label that they're not doing their part?
Well, I think that stream of thought has a very long history in our country. There's a reason why. Part of what I understand from it is from people that are a lot smarter than I am, have studied this a lot longer than I have, and they understand that it's a way to dehumanize a person. If I look at a person's situation and I find it detestable, if I can somehow feel that this person deserved it, they must have gone the wrong way.
Yeah.
Perhaps they're not working hard enough. Maybe they didn't take advantage of our excellent free educational system. If I can tell myself those things, if I can stay plugged into that narrative, then I can keep driving. Otherwise, I'm stopped dead in my tracks with the reality that this is just not a fair deal.
Yeah. One of the reasons for doing this show or having the Power of One is to identify solutions, to identify, because I'm glad that we talked about some of the causes and some of the discriminatory practices that go on in our society. But from your standpoint, in addition to sources, how could we, or what can we be doing a little bit better to work on poverty and to work on eradicating homelessness or diminishing it?
My goodness. There's no way we have enough time to really answer those questions.
Yeah, in 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, no problem. 1 minute for each.
Okay, pick one.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I do.
Okay.
Wherever I can, whenever I can, I try to create community with another human being or two. I try to get real with another person.
How does that look?
It looks like if you cut me off, I'm still gonna be your friend. You know, it looks like if we're in the grocery store together, we can talk together about prices and what they're doing and what we're gonna make for dinner tonight. And it's just a way of saying, like, I mean, I remember the 70s, like, I'm okay, you're okay. Like, we can be okay together. A lot of this, I think, problem comes from us being disconnected and having this sense that there is a hard and fast line drawn between us where it's always going to be us and you're always going to be them. And so I'm trying to bust that up as much as I possibly can, and at the same time really help people find a reason to hope. So we work with people, we partner with them to help them feel empowered, to understand where their power comes from, that one person can make a difference. They can make a difference in their own life and in the life of someone else, even if the odds are great.
So I love what you said about taking it on personally or living it, and whether it's whether you said cutting someone off, which happens on the road all the time, but it's also when you're waiting in line or at a supermarket or at a bank or There are all sorts of places where you can do it, but I know for me, I try to manifest that too, or emulate it too, but it's hard. How do you, what sort of tactics do you use to keep reminding yourself that that's the way to create change?
I pray. You know, I maintain my conscious contact with God. I work my program of recovery, you know, and I keep people in my life that are going to remind me, you know, that the best is yet to come, that it's not all bad news, that there's a lot of good news. There is a reason to hope, and we can, sometimes it's easier to build hope with another human being than it is to do it alone. Ultimately, I do think with regard to homelessness in particular, we're going to have to look at other solutions than market solutions. That's where my head is, and I hope that people, that as they get empowered and get jobs and move through a system that they have made a space for themselves in, that they'll be able to help us change it from the inside out.
Yeah. I think the key point that you talk about is creating this atmosphere where it's not us and them, or it's not they're different from us, but that we actually create community. So what would you, what are you most proud of in your work? What is it that you really think about each day that really motivates you or inspires you?
Oh, the people that we work with. They're amazing. They are amazing. They rock my world. I met a woman just a couple days ago. She's probably in her late 60s, early 70s, and she talked about how much hope she had after we met, but she was the one who inspired me. Yeah. With how much beauty she still saw in the world, and how she described her contribution after having a very successful career and being willing to try one more time inspires me endlessly. The people we serve, whether they're coming out of prison or they're still living on the street and struggling to get to work every day, they're amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I wish we had more time to talk. Like I said, I have dozens more questions, but it was wonderful to have you here. So keep up the great work at Sources and at Union Station. We really need it. And we appreciate everything you do in the city.
Thank you. Thank you so much.